does not dwell in temples made by man's hand, but he dwells in what temples? These temples. So there's only one act that's spiritual in that sense, which is sexuality, where it's a spiritual act of two people becoming one. So he's saying, should the temple of God, should prostitution be happening in the temple of God? And he said, no, that shouldn't be the case. Why? Because your body is the temple of the Lord. So there should be no room for any kind of prostitution. So we're talking about sexual immorality when we talk about your body as a temple. We're not talking about earrings. We're not talking about none of that type of stuff. Because if we're going to talk about that, we need to stop eating Big Macs, stop eating French fries, fried chicken, if we're going to say that's what it means when the body's a temple. It's a sexual immorality issue. Now, the other verse when it comes to tattoos is Leviticus 28. You shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead or tattoo yourselves. Why? I am the Lord. Now, context, okay? First of all, immediate context. Well, before we even get to context, let's look above it and let's look below it. Above it, it says you should not eat any flesh with blood in it. Dag, I guess if we're eating steak, medium rare, we're in sin. And it also says above it, you shall not round off the hair on your temples or mar the edges of your beard. Yep. So, when you go to the barbershop, you're in sin if this stands. So if I'm in sin for my tattoos, you're in sin for getting your hair cut, and you're in sin for eating red meat. But this is where everybody gets it. It says above that in verse 23, when you come to the land and plant any kind of tree or food, when you shall regard as fruit, you shall regard as fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden to you. You must not eat it. In the 4th year, the fruit is holy, an offering unto the Lord. But in the 5th year, you can eat it. So, if you're eating any fruit that has not gone through a 5-year process of cultivation, you're in sin.
So if you're in North America, then
you're in sin. Okay. So now, we've got some issues here with this law. Now, contextually, right, why was God giving them these laws and these statutes, right? One is because Israel needed a specific sets of rules, dietary rules, rules for living, because they lived in a completely different culture, completely different society that was beneficial for them. They didn't have some of the things that we have, preserves and so on and so forth. They could get sick a lot easier. This is why Israel is one of the healthiest nations, because God helped preserve them by not letting them eat raw food at this time. There were no refrigerators, so on and so forth. So it was a lot of those type of restrictions. Now, some of them were arbitrary because he's like, hey, I'm God, so do it because I say so. And that was okay. Now, in terms of making cuts on the flesh or tattoos, it says, cut your body for the dead or tattoo yourselves. Now, first of all, it says for the dead or tattoo yourselves. Now, why would he say this? Because in this period of time, the pagan practice was to bleed yourself and mark yourself up in worship of the dead. So it was I'm going to mark myself up so that the dead can receive worship. I'm going to suffer. It was a way of mourning for people. Like, I'm going to suffer because you died, and I'm going to mark myself up in worship of you, in honor of you. And God is saying, stop these pagan practices. Stop. You're trying to worship like they worship. Stop it, because ultimately you're going to end up mastered by them, right? So you're going to end up living under them. And living out what they live, worshiping who they worship, right? So he's telling them to stop this. So when we're talking about worship of the dead, we're talking about something completely different than just randomly marking on your body, you know what I'm saying? Which you would say, common sense-wise, like, why would you even want to do that? That's what I would say to my kids. They're like, I want a tattoo. I'd be like, first of all, why? Why do you want to mark up your body with a bunch of ink? Like logically, why do you want to do that? So if he doesn't have any real convictions for that, or he doesn't feel like, I don't know, I just think it's cool, then I'll say, no, you probably don't need to do it, because you can't get rid of it. Or you can pay, but I'll be like, if you just want some style, a little flair, I probably wouldn't do that, right? Now, if he comes to me, Dad, I'm just really fully convicted, I feel like this is a great way for me to honor the Lord, I'm an urban missionary, I'm, so on and so forth, man, it just demonstrates for me just my compassion, my commitment to the Lord Jesus, and so on and so forth. Or I just like art. I'm very passionate about art. I feel like God has wired me to demonstrate his glory through art and artwork, and I'm just passionate about it. I don't worship it, but for me, it's just a great way to articulate his glory and his goodness in art. The same way a pianist would say, I just want to sit and write, compose beautiful songs. Then, hey, then you do what you do. You're free to do that. You're not more or less a Christian because of that. You know, I'm not telling people to run out and go get them. I think people shouldn't. In this day and age, everyone's getting them because it's trendy. You know what I'm saying? It's a fad, and you're not going to be able to get rid of it. Lil Wayne is going to be 52 one day, and his whole freaking body is covered in junk. And I'm like, dog, you don't even know what you're doing. But the reason why they do that is because they don't have, like, Christians should think eternally. They don't think with an eternal mindset. They think they're going to die tomorrow. They live for today. They live fast and die young, and that's the way they live. So they just do whatever feels good in the moment. And if we follow suit, we're going to pay the same consequences that they're going to pay just because we're trying to be cool like they're being cool. So that's something that I would think about, and I would warn people when they just run out and get random tattoos, so on and so forth. So, yep.
Awesome.
Yep.